Your bedroom is supposed to be the safest room in your house. It's where you're meant to rest, to recover, to dream. It's the one place where the world is finally locked outside and you can just breathe. But looking back at what I once believed, we never saw bedrooms that way. Not because of the furniture or the walls or anything you could touch, but because of what happened in that room when no one was watching. The repeated habits, the quiet routines, the things people did every single night without ever realizing. They were slowly reshaping their own thoughts, their emotions, their relationships, and most of all, their peace. So, let me ask you something. Why do some people feel completely fine all day, but the moment the sun goes down, anxiety creeps in? Why does peace seem to evaporate the second the lights go off? Why do so many couples have their worst arguments inside the one room? That's supposed to bring them closer. And why do so many people sleep for 8 hours and still wake up feeling like they never rested at all? I used to study these questions for a living. My name is Aisha. For over 2 decades, I was part of a network that observed human behavior in ways most people would find unsettling. We weren't casting spells in the way movies show it. At the time, I believed we were doing something spiritual. Looking back, I realize most of it was simply understanding people better than they understood themselves. And tonight, I'm going to reveal the 7 hidden bedroom habits I once believed slowly changed people from the inside out. But before I get to the first one, I need you to understand something. None of these habits look dangerous. That's the entire point. They look normal. They look harmless. They look like things everybody does. And that's exactly why they work so quietly. So stay with me, because the 7th one is the habit that I watched undo everything we tried to build in people's lives. Let's start with the first. The first habit is what I came to call the midnight courtroom. You know this one. You've lived it. You climb into bed, completely exhausted, and the second your head hits the pillow, the trial begins. Suddenly, you're replaying that conversation from this afternoon. You're rehearsing what you should have said. You're building the perfect comeback for an argument that ended hours ago. You're imagining future confrontations that may never even happen. The body is lying still, but the mind is standing in a courtroom, prosecuting, defending, replaying the evidence over and over again. There was a woman I observed for a long time. I'll call her Alina. She was sharp, capable, respected at work. But every night, around the same time, she would lie in the dark and put her entire day on trial. Every mistake, every awkward moment, every text she regretted sending. At the time, I believed that this kind of repeated mental activation created an opening, a kind of doorway that we could influence. Looking back, the truth is simpler and almost more disturbing. She was doing the damage herself. We didn't have to add anything. We just had to watch. Because here's what that habit does. When you fall asleep emotionally activated, your nervous system never fully powers down. You spend the entire night in a low hum of stress. And by morning, you wake up already tired, already defensive, already braced for a fight that hasn't even started yet. The body stayed in bed. But the mind never stopped fighting. And what eventually changed for Alina wasn't dramatic. It was a single question from her sister, who one evening simply asked her, "Who are you arguing with when the lights go off?" That question stopped her cold. She didn't fix it overnight, but she slowly started catching herself, interrupting the trial and telling herself, "Court is closed. I'm not on the stand tonight." It took weeks, but the sleepless nights began to soften. But thoughts weren't the only thing people were carrying into the bedroom. Because there was something else, something almost everyone holds in their hand right now, that I watched reshape people just as powerfully. The second habit is the digital altar. I want you to think about the last thing you look at before you close your eyes. For most people, it's a screen. The phone glowing in the dark, just inches from your face. And you tell yourself you're winding down, you're relaxing. You're just scrolling for a few minutes. But you're not winding down. You're winding up. I observed a young man, I'll call him Marcus, who did this every single night. 2 hours, sometimes 3, scrolling in the dark. And it was never peaceful content. It was news that made him angry. It was the highlight reels of people who seemed to be doing better than him. It was the slow, steady drip of comparison and outrage and fear. At the time, I believed that whatever a person fed their mind in those final, waking minutes became the emotional foundation we could build on. And honestly, looking back, that interpretation wasn't far off. Because the brain doesn't simply switch off when you fall asleep. It takes whatever you gave it last and uses that to process the night. Your last 30 minutes become tomorrow's first emotions. Marcus would wake up irritable and didn't know why. He'd feel behind in life before he'd even gotten out of bed. He started pulling away from his friends because he felt like he had nothing worth sharing. We didn't have to push him into that hole. The screen did it for us night after night. What finally helped him wasn't some grand revelation. He just started leaving the phone across the room and replacing it with a notebook. The first few nights were genuinely uncomfortable. His hand kept reaching for a phone that wasn't there. But within a week, his sleep changed. And within a month, so did his mornings. But there was something even more destructive than a screen. Because the next habit didn't just affect one person. It poisoned two people at the same time. The third habit is the cold divide. This is the habit of going to sleep angry, not arguing, not yelling, something quieter and far more corrosive. It's the silent treatment. The backs turn to each other. The deliberate distance in a bed that's only a few feet wide but feels like miles. I watched a married couple live this way for years. I'll call them David and Maya. There was no betrayal, no catastrophe, just an accumulation of unspoken words. Disagreement after disagreement, swallowed instead of spoken, until the silence itself became their nightly routine. They didn't fight. They just rotted, slowly, side by side. At the time, I believed unresolved tension in the bedroom created a kind of vulnerability in the relationship, something we could widen. And whether or not you believe that part, the emotional reality was undeniable. When you sleep next to someone you're quietly resenting, your body doesn't treat them as safety. It treats them as a threat. You don't rest. You stay subtly guarded. And over months and years, the two of you drift into separate worlds while sharing the same mattress. I have to be honest with you. This is the part that's hard for me to talk about. Because I watched their connection hollow out, and at the time, I saw it as a success. Now I see it for what it was. Two people who loved each other, losing each other one silent night at a time. Bedrooms stop feeling safe when pride moves in. What changed for them was not a miracle. It was a single, exhausted, honest conversation at 11 o'clock on an ordinary night. David finally said, "I don't know how to fix this, but I'm tired of pretending." Maya didn't have an answer either. She just cried and then admitted she felt the same. They didn't solve everything, but they stopped sleeping in silence. And slowly, the room started to feel like theirs again. And then there was a habit almost nobody ever questions. A habit so common that most people would defend it without hesitation. The fourth habit is the artificial lullaby. This is the habit of never allowing silence. The television playing as you drift off. The podcast running all night. The background noise that has to be there. Or you simply can't fall asleep. You tell yourself it helps you relax, and maybe on the surface it does. But I noticed something in the people I observed who couldn't bear silence. It wasn't really about the sound. It was about what the silence forced them to feel. The moment the noise stopped, the thoughts they'd been avoiding all day came flooding in. The grief they hadn't processed, the anxiety they kept outrunning, the questions they didn't want to face. At the time, I believed that constant noise kept people from ever hearing the quieter, deeper voice inside them, the part of them that might actually call them toward healing or change. Looking back, I think the simpler truth is this: when silence feels dangerous, it usually means there's something inside that's been waiting a long time for your attention. I'm not telling you noise is evil. I'm telling you that if you cannot stand even a few minutes of quiet, that's worth being curious about. Because the things we refuse to sit within the silence don't disappear. They just wait. And they grow. But objects in the room carried weight too. Because the next habit wasn't about what people did. It was about what they kept. The fifth habit is the contaminated anchor. Bedrooms have a way of becoming storage rooms for old seasons of our lives. And I don't mean clutter. I mean emotional anchors. The gift from the relationship that broke your heart still sitting on the dresser. The box of old letters in the closet. The reminders of a version of your life that ended, but that you never fully let go of. I observed people who slept every single night surrounded by objects tied to their deepest pain. And they didn't even realize it. To them, it was just a necklace, just a photo, just a shirt in the drawer. But at the time, I believed these items acted as anchors, quietly keeping a person tethered to a season they were trying to move past. Whether you see that spiritually or simply emotionally, the effect was real. They were sleeping beside grief they had never actually processed. Some things stay physically long after they've left us emotionally. And every night, without a word, they whisper the past back into a person who is desperately trying to build a future. One woman I observed didn't begin to heal until she finally, gently, removed those reminders from the room, not in anger, not as some dramatic ritual, just a quiet decision that her resting place would no longer be a museum of her pain. But the next habit was even quieter. So quiet that it happened in the first few seconds of the day before most people were even fully awake. The sixth habit is the dream state agreement. It's what you do the instant you open your eyes. And for most people now, it's the same thing every single morning. The eyes open and the hand reaches for the phone. Before you've taken a single conscious breath, you're absorbing emails, headlines, messages, other people's emergencies, and other people's lives. I watched a man do this for 2 years. The alarm would sound, and within seconds, he was scrolling. And before his feet even touched the floor, his whole emotional baseline for the day had already been set, usually to anxiety, comparison, or dread. At the time, I believed those first few moments of waking were a kind of unguarded window, a moment when whatever you allowed in would shape the entire day that followed. And honestly, I still think that's true, even stripped of anything mystical. Because the first voice you hear in the morning tends to set the tone for every voice that comes after it. If the first thing you do is brace for bad news, you'll spend the rest of the day looking for it. What changed for him was almost laughably simple. He started keeping the phone out of reach and giving himself just a few minutes before the noise rushed in to simply be present, to breathe, to set the tone himself instead of letting strangers set it for him. And that brings me to the final habit, the one that, looking back, mattered more than all the others combined. The seventh habit is the unguarded transition. Here's what I mean. For most people, the bedroom has no beginning and no end to it. There's no intentional way they enter the night and no intentional way they begin the day. They just collapse into bed whenever exhaustion wins, and they get jolted awake whenever the alarm screams. Everything is reactive, random, unguarded. And I watched what that randomness did to people over time. Their inner lives became just as chaotic as their nights. No reflection, no reset, no moment to release the day or to prepare for the next one. But then there was someone I could never reach. I'll call her Eleanor. She was older, living alone with plenty of reasons to be anxious. Fixed income, health problems, family that rarely called. By every measure, she should have been trapped in every single habit I've described tonight. But she wasn't. And looking back, I think I finally understand why. Every night before she got into bed, she did one small, deliberate thing. She sat on the edge of the mattress, closed her eyes, and quietly handed the day over. The worries, the regrets, the things she couldn't control. She didn't carry them into the sheets with her. And every morning, before she let the world in, she took a quiet moment to begin the day on purpose, with gratitude, rather than in reaction. It wasn't a ritual. It wasn't complicated. It was simply intentional. She had decided that the way she entered the night and the way she began the day would not be left to chance. And that single decision made her, in my experience, almost impossible to disturb. What you repeatedly do in private eventually shows up in public. And her private peace had become unshakable. So let me say this to you: as clearly as I can. You don't need to fear your bedroom. You don't need rituals. You don't need to lie awake tonight in a panic, analyzing every object and every habit. That's not the point of anything I've shared. The point is awareness. Because every one of these habits is reversible. The midnight courtroom can be closed. The digital altar can be put down. The cold divide can be bridged with one honest conversation. The artificial lullaby can give way to a silence you slowly learn to befriend. The contaminated anchors can be gently released. The mornings can be reclaimed. And the unguarded transitions can become intentional moments of rest and renewal. You don't have to overhaul your entire life tonight. You just have to begin. Better sleep. Less noise. Less resentment carried into the dark. A little more reflection. A little more intention. A little more peace, chosen on purpose instead of left to chance. Because here is the truth I wish someone had told the people I once watched suffer in silence. Your bedroom should not feel like a battlefield. It should feel like permission to rest. And if something in this resonated with you tonight, if you recognized even one of these habits in your own life, I want you to do one small thing. Go down to the comments and write these words. I choose peace over patterns. Not for me, for you. As a marker, as a quiet decision that tonight is where something begins to change. And if you want to keep walking this road, if you want to understand how to rebuild the peace these habits quietly stole, then stay close. There's more I haven't shared yet, and it goes even deeper than tonight. I'm Aisha. I spent a long time studying how people lose their peace in the dark. Now I spend my time helping people take it back. So tonight, when you turn off the lights, I hope you don't feel fear. I hope you feel permission. Permission to set it all down. Permission to rest. May you finally sleep in peace.